All right, this week's topic on the Jeskidding podcast is how to bring people together, crossing the Great Divide. So we live at a time that's very, very divided, where people don't seem to eye to eye. Social media seems to have made that worse. So I wanted to talk about what are the skills, what are the stupid things, what are the tricks, what are the senses of humor, whatever the F you need to do to somehow get people a little bit closer together in this world. This is the Jeskidding podcast, where sometimes I say stupid shit. I should use this button. Stupid. There we go. And then I'm like, I was just kidding. And then other times I say really thoughtful things, and you're like, just kidding. Boom. We do it live in front of an audience on Twitch. They're watching, typing now. And we broadcast it around the world to like 7 people. It's 700 given time. All right. So 7,000. 7 million, Redneck. We're here with Austin, by the way, Redneck Rebel. How many people are we going to broadcast to in the future? Are we going to be successful? Is this going to be a hit show?
Yeah. I mean, of course it will.
Okay, cool. So you heard it from a redneck. So if a fucking kind of Jewy-looking New York guy can have a podcast with a redneck rebel from Kentucky, anything's possible, and the Great Divide can be crossed. So let's talk about what separates people. So we live in a really divided time. Obviously, this seems like a very big topic, but it can be discussed from an emotional standpoint, from a ideological standpoint, from a humor standpoint. There's a lot of things that sort of can bring people together. Now, for me, I like it when people get along. And a lot of people, they don't seem to share this notion. Red, have you noticed this, Austin? That people just seem to like not getting along in today's culture?
Oh, for sure. It's almost like not getting along with people is the cool thing to do.
Right. Being a fucking divisive asshole is the new, wearing your shoelaces on your forehead. I don't really have any sense of style, so I just assumed that was a thing that kids did.
Or being devil's advocate.
Yeah, or, oh my God, fuck, devil's advocate. That's the guy who just wants to be divisive on everything. So from a very early age, I don't know if you feel this way, Austin, from a very early age, I've wanted people to get along. That's been sort of my modus operandi. Maybe my parents were divorced, and I wanted mom and dad to really secretly like each other. Maybe I didn't like conflict, and I always saw what would happen when two people would fight around me, or I'd somehow be brought into it. So my whole life, I've been sort of like a diffuser of situations, right? But I realized that I've kind of been an anomaly in that way. I realized that like me trying to be like a peacemaker for other people has often gotten me shot, like in the drive-by of life. You seem like you're also a peacemaker. Are you not?
100%. I always just want people to just get along and have a good time, really, no matter what.
So me and you see very eye to eye on this. We're very like, hey, people, just get along. Why can't we all just get along, like the famous Rodney King said? And there's something to that, you know. And so the question is today, why? Why cannot people get along? Why is the divide getting bigger? And we're not here to talk about specific politics and, Mueller report, or however you pronounce his name, and Trump, and this, like all that bullshit. Those are just very particular ways that people choose to sort of stay separate. So I'm going to go over some things that separate people, and I would love to get your feedback and anybody from the chat room. So here's some things that I see that separate people, right? The big ones. The big two are always politics and religion. Politics and religion are the fucking worst, because both of those are ideologies. Like the people sort of choose to subscribe to a particular sect. Do you notice that too, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, politics and religion are for sure the biggest divide amongst everybody in the world because of, specifically like religion. It's like rooted in like in just the way you grew up and your family and like even where you come from, like the Bible Belt, things like that. Like it's ingrained in you and you're like, no, this is it. So there's just nothing anybody can tell you to change your mind.
So you feel like that people taking like hardline stances like is the first thing that sort of causes divide between them, right? Like believing in some shit maybe too much. Oh,
a hardline stance and even difference just in ethical perspectives, because ethics are different in different parts of the world.
So, like, what's an ethical thing that you would do that maybe me in New York City would not do?
I don't know. I'm not really sure what New York is like, just what I know from just what people tell me, but it sounds like people in New York are just really, really rude to each other all the time for no reason.
Whoa, you have just crossed the fucking, the Great Divide. And no, actually, that's not good. You actually stood on one side of the divide. You didn't cross. You created a division between us just now because you made an assumption about New Yorkers from some stereotype
I also said that I
you
didn't
heard.
know.
No, but then you followed that with some shit that wasn't great. I'll assume you're just all really rude. Whoa. Well, what's the definition of rude to you?
Well, obviously you're not rude, right?
Yeah, fucking.
But it's just the dynamic of like
Kentucky manners, boy. Kentucky fried sharkin.
Well, I think walking down the street in Kentucky is a little different than like walking through the city of New York.
Yes,
how people. It's not as crazy and like just chaotic as like what New York is.
Right. No, it's 100% true. It's a very different life. So I guess one of the things that causes divides in people is just geographical differences and sort of different sort of cultures where they come from. And maybe those people are used to where they're from, right? So we can sort of agree on that. So it's political, it's religious, and it's geographical, right? So those are three we're going to list right off the fucking bat. Look at us, bro. We're being smart. We're sciencing our way through. We're halfway to curing peace in half of the world and solving hunger and cancer. Do you realize that, right? That's how smart we're being right now.
And we just started. Like
so we're finding a commonality right now between the two of us is that we're brilliant and that things will be solved. None of these things are true, but at least we're lying together to our audience. So religious, political, geographical, right? And then I'm going to I have a list, so I cheat. I make a list before these things. I do my homework. So we have individual needs, right? So individual needs, people need food, people need shelter, and those needs often conflict with other people. Like if there's a small area, like you take the whole Middle East and they're taking our land, you took our land, this land is my land, you stole my fucking land. I mean, that shit is like the age old, right? So the individual needs, sort of, there's like it's hard to be like, yo, I need that fucking food. And then they're like, no, I need that food. And then sometimes only enough food for one person. So that causes a divide and it's hard to come to terms with that. Then you have individual wants, right? Oh, I wanna be with that girl. I want that cheesecake. And maybe I want that cheesecake on that girl. Or, I don't know, maybe that girl's not as good as the cheesecake. I'm not sure. But the point is that those needs sort of conflict, right? So two of us want a cookie, right? It's not easy always to be like, hey, just split it. Would you split a cookie with me, Austin, if there was only one cookie?
I'd split 2 cookies with you.
What? You're kidding me. Oh, how much love am I feeling for you right now? So then there's demonization of people, where people sort of, to get those wants and needs, they'll sort of take another group and they'll demonize them. They'll make them that they're less than. They'll make them less human. They'll create less empathy with them. In terms of like making somebody invisible. We talked about single points of view, right? Those are often indoctrinated in people. They're taught the fucking things. They'll be like, hey, guess what? If people don't say please and thank you, then they're not worthy of your time. You know what I mean? Like, I think that if you take like Japan versus the fucking US, and like half the shit we do is like completely like so like foreign to how they see how people should be according to how they were raised, like that sort of ethical divide. So I think that like, and there's nothing wrong with where they are, but that's that sort of like, well, how do you bring two peoples together who just believe that you should behave in completely different ways? And you're from Kentucky, I'm from New York. So there are differences in how we're taught that we should behave around people. You're probably better mannered than me, at least in the eyes of sort of the please and thank you ma'ams, even though I got a lot of please and fucking thank you ma'ams in me. Are you a please and thank you ma'am kind of guy, Austin?
Yeah, pretty much always.
Yeah, always. You'd even, one day I was hanging out with Austin and he was like, thanks ma'am. I'm like, did you just call me ma'am? He's like, no, man, I didn't mean that. And I was like, all right, it's cool, dude. I mean, I'll march with you, whatever you want. I'm down. So Austin, so these are things that sort of separate people, right? Belief sets. And then there's anger. I think anger is like the number one thing we should talk about. Anger is like the number one thing I think that divides people. And whether it's anger that you're angry at the world or there's something that made you angry, because I think anger just makes you take a defensive posture in things. And anger sort of stops you from being able to, let your guard down enough to find commonality. Do you agree with this? I'm just going to keep asking.
I think it inhibits like your ability to be a little rational and understanding of like other points of view.
Right. So let's go to chat room real quick because this is a A very, very intense topic. I do funny shit, I do silly shit, but this one is a little more serious. So let's see what Mr. Ad in the chat room. His name is literally Ad Dig Bick, and you can sort of reverse those words and figure out what those mean. Dig Bick says religion and politics are divisive, but they also establish where you stand as a man. He said man, not woman. Hilarious. The difference is society is a tolerance and civil discourse of those stances that are lacking. I love to know everyone's religion and politics to know their foundation. That's awesome. So you're a type of person that wants to discover things about other people and maybe in the way discover something about yourself. But most people are not like that. Most people, and we're talking about left and right and center and all these, like, I think people in general now have gotten to the point where they just don't want to see any other point of view but their own. They just don't want to. I think they're choosing to be divided. I think they're choosing to sort of say, oh, no, I'm taking a definitive stance on something. I think that there's a rhetoric out there that says you got to take a stand on something. And I kind of don't like that. I don't want to take a stand on something. Like, they're like, oh, you got to be, what do you think about this person running for this thing and the thing that they said or did? And I'm like, I don't really have a stance on that. What do you mean you don't have a stance on that? You don't care? You don't care? I don't know if I can know you anymore. You don't care? No, it's not that I don't care. I just don't have a fucking opinion. Isn't that okay?
Yeah, you're somewhere in the middle. Like you don't feel strongly about it, or you don't disagree with it so much that you really have an opinion.
Yeah, or I haven't decided, or maybe I feel both ways about it. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe I feel like, well, I can see it this way and I can see it that way. What's wrong with that? We live in a time where people are like, yo, pick a fucking side. I don't want to pick a side. I feel like culture has gotten to the point, and Austin, I'm sure you can relate to this because you sound like a guy who's been to jail. I think that culture has gotten to a point where like you're everything feels like I'm going into prison, and they're like, okay, you either join the gang, right? If you're Latino, right, or you join the black people gang, or you're a white supremacist. I'm like, I ain't none of those. I don't want to join those. Stop making me join the gang. I don't want to. I don't belong in any of those because I find them divisive. But we're in a time where they're like, join the gang. And I've encountered some behavior recently on Facebook, of all places, of which they've just done some banning of very particular people today, individual voices, and that's a very interesting topic. But where, like, people are sort of calling out white people and black people, like it's just, oh, a bunch of white men did this and white men did that. And I said to somebody, listen, don't group me in with those people. I'm not those people. Please don't. And they're like, well, blah, blah, you should be able to. And then I got a 45-minute lecture and seminar. And I felt that it's just divisive, dude. It's not that it's racist or reverse prejudice. It's just divisive. It's like...
Well, and the question I would have is, what does their ethnicity have to do with it anyway?
Well, that's what I said. And then I got yelled at and got a dissertation on why white people don't listen. And maybe they don't. But I don't know. I'm just me, in a white person's skin. And that's fair. You know what I'm saying? So... And there is part of the perspective that is being a white guy in the U.S. I am that, and I cannot divorce that, and I recognize that I have more privilege. But I get all that. That's all fact and true. And if you deny that, then you're just denying reality. That's true. There are privileges to being somebody who looks like me. That's just fact. Over other people, in America. But if I lived in Japan, it'd be very different because I don't look like Japanese people. But anyway, so my point is, though, there are moments where I feel like I'm grouped in with people that don't necessarily align with what I represent in my life. So how do I, in that moment, cross that divide with that person? How do I diffuse that situation when I'm being sort of pigeonholed? Like, and in many ways that they've been pigeonholed in their life. They've been trapped into points of views. And I'm not saying, this is not an example to be like, why is somebody picking on the white guy? But more to say, like, it's just an example of somebody starting a conversation where you're trying to find a common ground, and creating a divide immediately by placing someone else into a category. And I've done it. I'm sure I do it to people all the fucking time. You know what I'm saying? But my brain is always searching for ways to not do it. And I'm not talking about the religious or racial sense. I'm talking about in the sort of like, if I'm having a fucking conversation with somebody, if you start off by offending them, you're not going to be able to get along. And it's like, I think that it's interesting to me where you're from, Austin, because where you're from, people get along but and I've been to the South many times, and forgive me for generalizing, but I'm going to. But people get along, but it's like this surface level get along. It's like this polite shit could break out at any time. Hey, how you doing? It's sort of like an indicator, but there's an undercurrent there. Whereas here, people don't always get along, but it's out in the open. And that we were able to find common ground through that because there's just nothing fucking hidden. You know what I'm saying? So I just find it all very interesting. So have you found yourself in situations where you couldn't make... first, I think because you yourself were put into a group or people had assumptions about you, that you couldn't sort of find a way to get along with somebody else because they've already typecast you as something? I'm sure that's happened to you, right?
Oh, it happens. I mean, literally all the time online, with games that I play and stuff like that. People will just hear my voice for a second and they just like think they know me.
Yeah, well, they think you're just some backwoods idiot, right? I mean, it's kind
backwoods idiot, incest.
No,
I mean,
incest?
all the above.
Oh my god, that's not a fun one to have attached to you. You're the Jamie Lannister of rednecks, right? Seriously. So you don't watch Game of Thrones, do you? It's fine.
No.
Yeah, I figured you do. There was no laughter there, so I figured if you can't laugh at incest, what can you laugh at? So I find that beyond just people sort of pigeonholing each other and that making it difficult to have those moments of coming together, I have always wanted other people to get along. And when I'm in a room full of people and say there's 6 other people there and they're not getting along or they're arguing over something, I play a lot of video games online where I have to meet new people and bring them together quickly to achieve a common goal. I find it very difficult to diffuse time bombs between people's personalities. I find it very difficult to sort of help people see the humanity in other people. And I'm good at it, but it's very difficult. What's a technique would you say? I feel like I'm doing a fucking psychology podcast, but what's a technique that you would use if 2 people were arguing to get them to stop arguing? What would you do?
I mean, that's really a good question because, you can say, oh, come on, guys, get along. But it's like, who are you? And
right.
You don't matter to them. And it's like, I think it's a lot of it is just being anonymous and there's no motivation or gain for them to just be nice to somebody they'll never see again. But I personally don't see it that way.
Haven't you seen situations where people can have a fight in the street and then the guy who goes over and is like, hey guys, you should blah, blah. That's the guy who gets punched in the face.
Yeah.
A lot because the people want what they want. In that moment they want the conflict. Mr. Ad said that I embrace individualism. I do embrace individualism, but I also embrace the group, and I embrace harmony of people. And I think that you need a little bit of both. I think you need to be an individual, but I think you need to be an individual that's conscious of the macro sense of how you fit into the larger group. And the larger group, I think the more inclusive you can be of the larger group, at least in your brain, I think that the better chance that you can be an active participant in trying to get that group to sort of be closer together. You take are you from a predominantly Republican area, Redneck? I mean, Austin.
No, I think it's more Democrat.
Interesting. So we have a moment in time here. It's no different probably from any other moment in time. But in America, politics is fucking unhinged right now. It's unhinged. It's crazy, right? And we have, and this is across the world, where super far right ideology and super far left ideology are at war. And I think 80 to 90% of the people in the middle have no idea what the fuck to do about it because they're sort of being pushed to the fringe, or they're being sort of psychologically baited into it, right? By people who are doing inflammatory shit to get them to that stance. I think there are people saying things to get them to sort of, to get them to be people that they're not. Forcing them into those jail, you're now a fucking Nazi propaganda. You know what I'm saying? I feel the pressure to sort of be the one of us group member of the vocal minority.
Well, and especially now, like in this country. I think political opinions have really been stronger than ever.
Oh yeah.
And
But why is that?
that's,
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the last election, people just got more involved. And they've kind of seen, I guess, the result of, decisions that can be made. I mean, politics is like the two things I never talk about is politics and religion, especially on my stream. Like, I have people ask me stuff like that all the time, and they probably think they know what I support just because of where I'm from or how I speak or anything like that. But
Well, why is politics such a hard topic to talk about?
I think because people have different ethical stances and things that they perceive to be, correct and humane. And, it's just really just depends on where you're from and how you were raised and what your stance on ethics is. And because I think that's like the big part of it right now is people just think that, I guess our president isn't ethically grounded.
Well, he's fucking insane, but that's a whole nother topic. Whether he's insane and good for the country or he's insane he's bad for the country, that's really the issue of debate. I think that the majority of people, and I'm taking a very strong stance on that, because the majority of people who are that I've talked to that are conservative, that are Republican, will fully admit that their president shouldn't be tweeting 75 things at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know what I'm saying? They'll be the first ones to say, yeah, he's kind of an asshole, but I like that he represents X, Y, and Z. And then the left, in this case in America, says we can only see that he's an asshole. And we unfortunately, that won't let us look at anything else that he's actually doing. Most of which I personally disagree with, but that doesn't mean that all of it is horrible. I mean, in our country at the time, the economy is actually doing quite well as a whole. Not for everybody, not in every instance, but that's actually happening. Now, whether he's the cause of it or not, I don't know. But I try to have like at least a nuanced perspective on it.
And it's nothing either that I don't know enough about what's going on or politics to even have a proper dialogue about it or even stance. Like I have a very outside view of like what's going on with that. Like it's not something I keep up with or research or anything like that. So
right.
Well, I can't even have a meaningful dialogue about it anyway.
But your rarity is like you understand your own ignorance to the topic, and that's not an insult, but that's just you don't know enough about that ignorance, and you accept it. Go to chat room. So Tripod says because people are passionate about their beliefs, and many get upset when that is challenged. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we can't come more together is because we're constantly our egos are bruised by even having conversations about things that we don't that challenge what we think. And I think that on both sides of the equation, that kind of conversation is disallowed. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, oh, you can't talk about that. You can't have that point of view because I'm just going to yell at you until you don't have that point of view. I'm not going to listen to you. And that's one of the big problems is nobody fucking listens to each other. You know what I mean? Nobody.
It's because of the volatility of those kinds of conversations where it's like, instead what it should be is two people, having a stance, I think we should do this or I think we should do that and then meet somewhere in the middle where you can try to be both satisfied.
This is called sensible, right? What you're explaining is fucking sensible. Like if I have a conversation with somebody who's a big advocate of having gun rights and being able to have responsible gun rights and this and that, I'm the kind of person to be like, why? And not in a negative way. I want to understand them. And I think that's what we're lacking is we're not like, I want to know why they feel the way they feel before I even give my own point of view so that I can at least keep in the back of my mind what their wants and needs are. Is it cultural? Is it safety? Is it a belief that it will solve a solution? You know what I mean? And once I understand that, I can at least have a more nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think that once you stop listening or asking or trying to empathize or really understand that this is part of this person's universe, They're brought up owning these things. This is part of their identity. Then, once you really hear them out, you would hope that the other person also wants to hear your point of view and see how what their belief set is actually how it's affecting you. You know?
Well, and I think it's important sometimes to understand that in some situations you just won't get it, or they just won't get you.
No.
And that's okay.
And that's
like,
okay
you just
too.
need to be able to say, you know what, we just don't view it the same.
Yeah,
and then just leave it at that.
I agree with that completely. And you know, I think that people get angry about agree to disagree. They get pissed off. What do you mean agree to disagree? Fuck you. No, that's not a way to have a fucking meaningful conversation, because maybe in that hour-long conversation that you were really sort of listening and talking to the other person and presenting your point of view in a respectful way, hopefully there's some respect in there. Maybe there's like one or two things that you could glean from each other that you didn't have before. Maybe they can have like put a face to it. So my whole life I've been, like I said, a problem solver. Like always wanted to bring people together and solve problems and make people like each other. I like it when people are happy. And that's kind of one of my faults too, is I'll do things to make a group of people happy to make them not fight. And then sometimes they need to fight. And that's something I got to accept too. Sometimes they got to argue it out, punch each other in the face, and then figure it out later. But I just don't always... I don't think that's the best answer. I think that goes to a very negative place. Go to the chat room real quickly. Aardvark says, it's literally all horrible. No nuance needed. The more attention you pay to it, the worse it gets. I think he's talking about politics. And I can understand you're at the point where you're frustrated by everything that's happening. I'm frustrated too. And you just want to be like, not stick your head in the sand in a negative way, but just fucking hear it. It doesn't seem like it's going to get solved. So I think that the majority of people want to see these things get solved. They want to see them move forward. They want to see people have actual conversations that net actual results. But they see it just not happening, and they feel powerless. Most people feel powerless to be able to bring people together. Would you agree with that?
I feel that way a lot.
Tell me. I'm going to put on my psychologist hat. Tell me your deepest, darkest thoughts about why you can't bring people together. Or tell me your most positive ones, whatever you need to.
Well, because it really doesn't come down to me. It really just comes down to them. I'm kind of like trying to be this bridge to connect them.
Right.
But like they have to meet in the middle of it. So like sometimes you just can't get that.
Right. Do you feel like sometimes that you feel, and I feel this way, so I'm asking you, do you feel like inadequate because you don't have, in some cases, the tools to bridge the two of those groups or peoples? I do. I feel like what's wrong with me that I can't help these people get along better?
Yeah, because I'm an overthinker, an overanalyzer.
Yeah.
So.
And you just want people to be happy, right? Like, I also rush to making them happy over maybe a more sometimes substantive thing. But I'm like a goal-focused person. So when I'm like, yo, let's just all focus on the goal. If we all have a common goal, sometimes we may not see the best way to get there together, but at least we can be like, yo, let's look at this one thing together. Let's stare at that. You know, I think that when like you have things like in America, and I'm not taking any political stance on what I'm saying, and you have like September 11th happens, right? A lot of people really politically came together. Now, I don't agree with some of the results, but at least there was a sort of like, hey, at some point we got to fucking just stick together on this. Somebody just attacked us. And that was kind of like a good moment, that part of it. But I'll give you a quick story. One of the things I found most disturbing, right? I was living in LA. This is the lowest moment I've ever had in Los Angeles, because I find it to be not completely, but in my experience, what I didn't like, I found it very, very superficially and morally bankrupt in that way. There's great people there, but I really did not like it. Anyway, September 11th happens. I go outside, and I'm like, really, I'm devastated. I know people, that are missing. Can't find family members. I couldn't talk to somebody for like a week or two. The cell phones are all down. And I go outside, and there's like I didn't know even to talk to. And on the corner of my like this big popular boulevard, these guys had all set up a giant sign saying support firefighters. I'm like, wow, okay, I support the firefighters. It's terrible what they're having to do. And I went up and I was like, oh man, I felt some empathy with them for a second. But this very quickly turned from these guys doing this to start to scream and chant USA, USA. And it got kind of ugly, where like you heard things against Arab people and all this and that, very quickly. And it turned from like this moment of mourning to this moment of like, let's go get them. You know what I mean? And it felt very sort of inappropriate. A night later, they were gonna do like another little stage thing in the same sort of like party area of Los Angeles. Um, and I was in a coffee shop, and I'm like, I don't really. And I went outside and I saw this thing, and what it turned into was girls in halter tops jumping up and down on cars with USA shirts, having a party. And I'm like, that's not coming together. That's just being a fucking idiot. And I think that moments like that, you just got to step away and say, hey, this is not going to solve the problem. And at this moment, I can't be the voice of solving the problem. They're not going to listen to me. So in that moment, I just say, I can't affect change here. And it's very sad for, I think, people like us to be like, we can't force these people to find common ground and rational talk about finding a solution to what was a horrible problem. So, but that was definitely a moment in time, not barring that story. That was a moment in time I felt that America really came together, and I was really happy about that. Because I just want people to get along, dude. I don't want to go to my fucking friend's house and be like, you have 14-hour discussions about Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying? Or, why, da-da-da, and he's saying the things, this and that. I know people who are good, decent people who really like him. And I'm like, I just want to know why. Like, I don't want to hate them. I can dislike the man and what he stands for and what he says. But I don't have to hate the people who support him. I just have to try to understand them. And why? And people are, why do you want to understand them? That's just all hate. I mean, like, no. If you start seeing everybody in the same way, and then you lose the empathy it takes to bring people together. I think that when you do like any kind of arbitration between two sides who are warring factions that are killing each other in some cases, the first thing you need to do is to help them see each other as human. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, because everybody has, their own stance and their own feelings. And I think that's something that could be applied to a lot of things. Just understand that people are human.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's where it all starts, right? We're all here together. And sometimes we conflict on what we want or what we need. But the second we sort of actually say we are all actually the same, we have the same basic genetic code, we all kind of want the same-ish things. Some of us are a little more selfish than others. But for the most part, we all want to have good lives, get along, have enough resources to, not be totally screwed. Okay, so if we start there, right? If we start with these basic tenets, and we want to maybe, some of us want to believe in something greater than ourselves, and we want to be loved by other people, hopefully, and we want to love other people, and we want to enjoy our time here. Okay, so we've got like a base plate for humanity. That's the base. If we all just strip away all the bullshit, and then we say, this is the base, let's start with what we have in common. Okay, then let's build on it and say, okay, well, you believe this about that, whatever this or that is. How does it tie into those other things that we just talked about? Here's how it ties to me. Here's how it ties to you. And what are our goals together? And how can we sort of accept that thing about each other, learn from each other, so that we can still be facing the same original goals that I talked about? And I think that that can require arbitration by other people, because some people don't have the skill set to step outside of themselves. They really don't. And I think that a lot of people they just want to be right. Like, the ego just wants to be right. You don't need to be right. You just need to be human. You know what I mean? You just need to find ways to be human with the other humans around you. It's not that hard. Or maybe it is. Austin, what do you think? Is it like, are people incapable of just being a little more human?
I would think certainly. Some people, like you just touched on just a second ago, just really don't have the capacity to see things from the same eyes that you and I see that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that people lack that? Some people they lack that empathy gene. I guess some people they don't have it. Maybe, right? What do you think?
Maybe just a scientific explanation, being just biologically, they just don't have it. That's the only way I know how to explain it. I don't know if I mean, I think that can probably be a choice that they make, just a personality trait. Like maybe they know that they're wrong or they're being incorrect in some fashion, but they just don't. Maybe the pride and the ego just doesn't allow them to, kind of step back and understand other people or things like that.
No, I agree. Tripod said people can agree and they can disagree. That is all fine. But where you stand on the issue doesn't remove the respect you should have for your fellow man. I'll 100% agree. But that respect goes out the fucking window immediately. In fact, those conversations start from a place of disrespect. They don't respect each other from the inset because they don't respect. They think that because the other person's point of view is different than theirs, that person is less than them because they don't see the world in the same way. So if you start from that, that's why it's like so good to be like, here's a thing, let's all look at that. That's like the idea of like the pale blue dot. I think it's OCD is very smart at this. The Carl Sagan thing. Like once you saw the Earth from the different perspective of like the moon or whatever it is, you see it just as a pale blue dot. Everything changes because you see we're all just in this together and on this precious little place, and we're just trying to figure it out. And everything else on top of that is just complexity, right? We're all just trying to figure it out, man. I really hate arguing with people, but I understand that sometimes arguing is necessary to resolve conflict. Sometimes when you're dating somebody, the best way to have a better relationship is to have a big argument. Mm-hmm. Because you have to get it out because you've been too nuanced about it. You've been too dancing around things. You've been too sort of like respectful, and there's a real collide happening. And sometimes that collision has to happen. And I think sometimes as people who want other people to get along, you got to let that collision happen. But when there's a lot on the line, and lives are at stake and this and that, sometimes now's not the time for that collision. At least I think so. Mr. Ad said, stepping outside of yourself is tough when a lot of people fail at critical thinking and objectivity. So it forces you to retract your own needs and wants too. But I think, so I agree with that, but I think that retracting your own needs and wants is kind of part of being successful in some of these encounters. Like I said, I played this one video game where I have to bring 6 people together in fucking sometimes 40 seconds because we're playing against another team. It's like a team-oriented thing that I play. And I have to somehow get them all to see, A, that I have their all best interests at heart, B, that we have a common goal, and the more it becomes about the individual. So somebody asked me before, do I embrace individualism? Well, I embrace individualism to a point, but I don't embrace individualism over the needs of the group. If the group needs something, you take like, all right, here's a perfect fucking example. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant here for a second. You take the people who are fucking anti-vaxxers, right? There's a point of safety where that shit don't fly, but you still have to listen to them and hear their concerns. You know what I'm saying? Because they need to be heard, because obviously there's a cry for fucking attention there, but they're endangering the group. And in those moments, I think that sometimes that's where we're at. It's like a tricky point in society, right? Like you got people who are like, I'm not going to vaccinate my kids, even if it kills other people's kids or pregnant ladies' children or pregnant ladies. They don't care. They only care about their own political ideological viewpoint on the world and their own sort of like conspiracy theory of how they see what doctors are trying to do to them or their government is trying to get them. But at some point, you got to say, hey, there has to be some sort of accepted universal thing that we all agree upon. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and sometimes there is a right and wrong.
Yeah, sometimes there just is a basic right and wrong. And I think you see wars over that, right? Like people listen to that. Somebody asked me, what do I play in Overwatch? Overwatch is a video game I play for those watching the podcast. I play this character named Lucio for the chat room. Those who are watching and listening to us on YouTube, you'll have no idea what that is. But that's okay. If you take time to understand me and learn about me, maybe we'll get along better, asshole. Not you. Anyway. So somebody said in the chat room, Genetics said, they think autism is related to vaccinations. I get it. So I think we need to be better about listening to those people's concerns and not talking down to them. I think we do that a lot as a culture. I think that when we believe in something, we talk down to people. I had somebody who I argued with recently on Facebook. I don't know if it was an argument. It was the same thing. Everything argues on Facebook. It's the worst place in the world. But that whole thing of being, I got sort of like a dissertation from them. And I swear to God, whatever that dissertation was, I'd have to take 3 college classes just to understand what the fuck they said. And I'm a pretty smart guy. But they've had that conversation with their peers so many times, and they've been ready to dissect you in that moment for like 4 years because they've had it 4,000 times. So they're speaking to you in a way that you just don't understand, and you can't comprehend at both an intellectual and an emotional level. So when they do that, they're creating a further chasm with you, between you, which doesn't need to exist. And when you try to have them step that down, you get anger on their part or disbelief that you can't understand them. And I think that we have scientists who do this. We have, and there's 2 theories on this, right, Austin? There's like the theory from scientists are, I'm not going to, I agree. Somebody from the chat room, Red, said, just ask them to explain like I'm 5. I do that a lot. I'll say, hey, I'm just not very smart. Could you explain it in a different way? Because I find that that's helpful, for me at least. And sometimes they don't want to. There's like, scientists say, when they talk about evolution theory, when talking to creationists, I've seen some of the things on that. And the scientists are like, at some point, I can't keep explaining this to fucking crazy people. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's evidence beyond evidence beyond evidence, and they just want to live like flat earthers. At some point,
and that's where that comes in, where you just say, "Well, we just don't see this the same
at some
way."
point, you just got to walk away from the table, be like, "There's going to be no better relationship after this." Because there's a part of your brain that I have to. There's a function of acceptance too, right? Acceptance of like, if the other person believes something that you believe is batshit crazy, if there is no way to bring them to your side of the table even more, even if you think they're batshit crazy, sometimes the best thing to do is just accept that part of them, and then move on with that acceptance. I like when bringing teams together. I do it all the time. I'm like, okay, this guy's kind of a dick. I don't make that announcement because I don't want to trigger them or make them angry. But I'll be like, let's just focus on the goal. I accept this part of you that's kind of a dick. You know what I'm saying? Can we just move on and focus on something else? It's kind of like, hey, look, we actually need to eat today. We got to go catch a elk. I just made that up. Let's go catch that elk together. We can't talk about why we think Hillary Clinton emails or whatever the fuck they want to talk about. We got to go catch that elk. And say like, oh, we don't want to talk about like your kid may get the measles, but let's go get that elk. It's just sometimes it's just better to accept that they're a little crazy in your
pretty
eyes.
much any professional job, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, because you have to do that even in your career. I do it, I've done it a bunch of times across multiple jobs where you just have to, just work with somebody you disagree with or maybe don't like very much, but you've got this goal and this thing you got to do.
Right.
So it's like,
So yeah, sometimes you got to be like, hey, this is a fucking. So sometimes in sort of like how to bring people together, this is kind of the main topic today. We're talking around it. How to bring people together is sometimes to be like, okay, we accept that we have 10 things we got to cover here. We accept that number 2 is a sticking point. We will probably never agree on number 2. But if we can get through 3 through 8 and find common ground, maybe, just maybe, that when we come back to number 2, we'll both be a little more flexible because we realize on how much other shit we now agree on. You know what I'm saying? So I think that there's like, it's like getting people to get along is to not always be hardline stanced, to be open-minded, but also understanding of when certain points of contention are very closed and you need to just maybe revisit them later. But I think
an important thing too is know when and where to have those conversations. One place that I will never, ever, ever have a conversation. I mean, I wouldn't really anyways, but one place I will never, ever have any of these kinds of conversations is my job.
I think that's smart. Yeah, that's smart because you're all there to get along, right? And in those moments, so I think we can also say that getting along and how to bringing people together and crossing the great divide is sometimes just not to bring up points of conflict when you have other goals. And that's kind of what that is, right?
And you're going to cause like this heat and this rift between you and some guy or some girl that you got to see every day and work with, and it's not going to work. Like that's why, because I hear people, of course, across multiple jobs, I hear people have these really serious, conversations with strong points of view, and I'm like, gosh, I would never do this in a million years because it doesn't matter what I think of this or that. Like we're in a professional environment, and it's best that we all just like each other and get along regardless of our political or religious stance or whatever else.
Right, I agree with that.
All those don't matter.
I'm going to be very critical of the left for a second, and I'm only very particular people on the left. Some people on the left, more extreme people on the left. I think there are people on the left currently that need to just let some shit go. Like, I mean, everything is a sticking point. This guy said this from 20 fucking years ago. Sticking point. I don't like that. I think it's one of the things that's causing a great divide in our country and maybe in the world, I don't know, is that we are taking sound bites from people and boiling those people down to those sound bites. And boiling away everything else that they are, even if everything else they are is like 99.9%. And I think that we're doing it from a very Puritan value standpoint. Like everybody's absolutely pure and everybody does everything fucking perfect, right? And they've never said a thing about a person. And they've never done a thing. And they're hurling a lot of, stones, and they live in glass houses kind of thing, right? I mean, everybody's a hypocrite now. And that's this is one of the reasons we're so divided. Is everybody's a fucking hypocrite. Because everybody's calling out everybody else for bad behavior. Be it something they said or did, and we're not focusing on common goals. Does it make sense? Or what we have in common. We're only continuously pointing out what we don't. And we're demonizing people for not. Genetic said, who are you talking about? Now, I'm talking about in general. Like we're at a point in time where we're assassinating people's characters for political means. And we're boiling them down to things that they're not, Rhett said...
it's confirmation bias.
Oh, absolutely. Rhett asked if it was social justice warriors. That's the term for people who do this. I don't like using that term because I think it's unfair. I think it puts those people in a group that I wouldn't want to be put into. I think it's definitely...
also insulting as well.
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to insult anybody. I think that there's just an intolerance for other people now. On both sides. Whether it's religious intolerance coming from the right or social intolerance coming from the left. It's just intolerance in general. And tolerance is a big part of, getting along. You know what I mean? Tolerating the other person, understanding the other person, forgiving the other person, allowing them to just make mistakes to be. I'm not a perfect person. I've said all kinds of shit. I'm sure in the 15 or so episodes of this podcast, I've done some crazy shit that some person out there thought was the most offensive thing they've ever heard and thinks that I should never work again or never do this. Like, I'm just a person trying to be a nice person. You know what I'm saying? But if it doesn't fit, I think people's narratives, and this is across all political spectrums and all ideologies, people's narratives and what they want to say in the world and what they've chosen to believe in the world or have been taught are so strong and so pointed right now that they're willing to do anything or assign the value of what fits that narrative to anyone. Because it helps their belief set. It helps their cause. Genetic from the chat room said, money controls people. It often does. It often does. But it's not the only thing that controls people. It's not. Definitely, people just have very definitive ways to see the world. And I just don't think that brings people together. I think the acceptance that people see the world in different ways, that people are different, is what brings people together. accepting other people, listening to other people, learning to count on people that you may not agree with. I had a conversation today with somebody that was like, this politician said this thing. I mean, like, I don't know anything about this thing, so I'm going to speak from a place of ignorance for a second. But today there was a guy didn't want to run for the Fed, which is the group that controls economic policy in the United States. Trump appointed him. I'm personally not for anybody that guy puts in a place of power because he scares the shit out of me. But that's my belief set, and I'm happy to listen to somebody else's. But anyway, the guy decided not to run because he says the attacks on my family and my character are untenable for me and my family. I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. This guy's getting not bullied, but he's being sort of everything he said in the past is coming out. And he's not a perfect person, but a lot of people criticize him. They ain't perfect either. And maybe that's not the reason why he's in there. But the point I was getting at is, well, at some point, we got to be able to say, was the guy the right guy for the job? Like, if I have an electrician come to my house, no, not that guy, another guy. If I have an electrician come to my house, or when Austin here used to be a firefighter and he was going to save me from a building, before he saves me from the building, I'm not going to be like, hey, dude, do you believe in, are you pro-life or pro-choice? And then he's like, no, I'm pro whatever you are, I don't care, right? I would accept you either way and I'd listen to you. But if you're like, no, I'm this, I'm like, oh no, you can't save me. Or you can't fix my electrical problem in my fucking house. I just want to know if you're a good electrician or if you're a good firefighter. I don't want to judge everything about you and what you contribute to the world on one point of view that you have. That's stupid. It's stupid for two reasons. It strips the person away from everything else they can offer you. And it also traps them into being that one thing and that one thing only. And in fact, if you do that enough, you push that person into being more of that thing. And we do it on all sides. We do it to each other all the time. We're just like, we're so not only intolerant of people being different, we're so quick to make them simple. That's very scary to me. And it happens on all sides of all things. And it's gotten worse because of social media. It's amplified it. Have I said inappropriate things in my life? Absolutely. Have I made inappropriate jokes? You fucking betcha. Did I think that they were funny? Yep. Did it offend somebody somewhere? I'm sure. Did it make a lot of people laugh and feel good about their days? Yep. Would I take it back in the big scheme of things? Few of them, maybe. I probably feel differently about them now. But do I regret trying to make people laugh and have a bit of a brighter day and to think a little bit? Nope. Because why would you strip all those things away from me? You take like a Mel Gibson. I saw a documentary on him recently. I don't know anything about Mel Gibson, so this is another ignorant talk. Mel Gibson's liberal, and he said some horrible things, and I disagreed with what he said, and I think he came across like a guy with some really twisted viewpoints on the world. I really do. I disagreed vehemently with where his brain was at. But when we trap somebody like that, we also don't give him any opportunity to grow. So in the kind of conversation of how to bring people together, well, then you give them a way to make mistakes, to grow, to contribute what they can, even though you disagree with the things that they don't. It's like here's a prime example. Like, if you drive around in your car, Austin, you drive in a car, right? Do you drive a car? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So would you not put your license plate on your car if you knew it was made by a prisoner who may have killed somebody?
Probably it wouldn't make a difference.
Who fucking cares? It's like, I don't give a shit if you just stabbed your cellmate. It's a license plate. I don't want to think about the moral characteristics of that license plate for all the way down the line. Because the second I try to exert that kind of moral control over the rest of the world, it's just another way to divide people. So let's get to food brings people together. This is absolutely true. And that's why and OC Diva said that from the chat room. What a great statement. That's why it was so sad when Anthony Bourdain passed away. Because here was a guy, Anthony Bourdain was a drug addict for many years. And one of the things he did in his show, He said that the first thing people do, it's the most common thing in the universe, is they eat together. And to sort of find common ground, he started with common ground by having a meal with people from across the world and eating what they ate and discovering them through their food. That's fucking awesome. Because he starts from a place of common ground. Whereas in our culture today, we start from a place of what don't we get along with instead of trying to find the things that we do. And that's scary to me. Like the way that me and Austin, who are doing, I've never met Austin. Oh God, I'm hitting music. I was about to give a big speech of music. That's hilarious. I've never met Austin in person. Not yet. I'm sure I will at some point. But me and Austin met playing a video game. And the common goal, I believe, Austin, you can tell me what you think, in this video game was that we wanted to win and we wanted to have fun. And because we both felt the same way and started with common ground, even though he's a guy from Kentucky and probably more similar to me than I thought at first, and I'm a guy from New York, big mouth fucking New Yorker. I don't even say New York like that. I don't know why I said that. Like one of the ways we came together was we had a common thing. We started on common ground. Would you agree, Austin?
Yeah. On all points, we enjoy this game. We enjoy having fun. We enjoy being nice to people. We found these things out pretty quickly, and here we are.
I have friends that there are things that I don't like about them. There are friends of mine that I grew up with that I've known for 30 years, 40 years. And there's things that I think about them that I really, I'm kind of a harsh judge in my brain. I'm like, I really don't respect their points of views on things. I don't like some of the jokes they make. I think that they're highly fucking offensive. I think if some of those jokes are made in front of certain people that I know, they would be incredibly offended. But I have common ground with them. And I can share my point of view with them because that common ground, and I can help them grow. As opposed to the point where we are in our country is where we just find things to be angry at with each other as starting points. And we're never going to come together if that's where we start. Never. And Al's in the chat room. Thank you, Al. So we just need to find the things that, Al, for instance, right? I don't know everything about Al. I'm not going to talk about you too much. But Al is a black dude. I'm a white dude. And we take karate together, right? And there is obviously a skin difference between us. But we sweat and we suffer through this thing together. And it's a start of a relationship is we do this thing together, which is amazing, and we probably could be blood brothers. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? That's not really a divide between us because we look different, but we definitely have different backgrounds and different ways the world treats us. But we start with something that we do together. So I try to bring people together by having, moments that I can spend with them that are common. So I think about what are the ways that you can bring people together, well, you can have a little bit more empathy for people, right? We can start with more empathy. We can start with more understanding of what the other person wants and needs. We can have common goals, right? We can have things that we learn to look at together. When I make a film, the first thing I do is try to get us all to see what we're all trying to do together as opposed to just my vision. I try to get people to see the bigger picture. I try to get people to see the good in each other, even though they're only staring at the wrong. And then I try my hardest to see that life is just about basic needs and love, man. If you got love for anything in this world, then you can find love for each other. It's not that hard as long as you're willing to do it. Anyway, it's a big speech. I'm so sorry, Austin. You know me. I go on fucking tangents forever. We don't have that in common. You let me talk, I talk, and blah, 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 blah. Sorry about that. Sorry.
Can't interrupt and be rude, but I mean, I typically agree with everything you say because that's one of the things that we have in common. Something we share is we love to lift up people and make them feel good and help them and be that guy that sticks that hand out and it's come on, man, come with me.
Right.
It's fine.
Yeah, if possible. If possible. Some people will prejudge us both and won't allow us to do that. Some people will hear something that one of us said and won't allow us to do it. Some people will have a pre-bias and won't allow us to do it. And that makes me sad. That makes me sad because I want people to get along better. I don't want them to hurt each other. And so what do you
It
do?
does me too, and one of the things that I've always told people is don't underestimate the power that you give to someone just by believing in them.
Hmm.
And that's something that a lot of people just don't get. Just by you just saying, "I know you can do it," like that's huge for a lot of people because they might have 50 other guys telling them that they're not going to make it and they're wasting their time. But that one person that says, "You can do it," and I know you have it in you, that's what sticks out. And sometimes that's what people need to just get by. It's that little bit that just pushes them over that boundary.
And makes them want to be, by getting to that boundary, more together with other people. You know what I'm saying? By that gift. So I think that you're describing it perfectly. It's like we just need to give more. We need to listen more. We need to give more. And, we need to try, when being judged harshly, to still try to absorb some of the punches. Sometimes know when to walk away. But allow people to be heard so that there's a conversation that happens. You know what I'm saying? What you're describing is a conversation, right? You're describing somebody being open to getting those kind, lovely words, but then the other person being open enough to give them. But only when those two people are open enough to have that dialogue happen, be it that they're looking at a common goal, being that they're ready to let down their defenses, ready to let down their ego. Only then will people start to come together, when they drop some of the defenses and offenses that they've hard baked into their personality to try to survive this world. And that's the only way we're going to cross the great divide of what's happening between people is, listen more, love more, allow openness to happen between you, and we'll all realize how similar we all are, and we'll focus on what we all need to do together.
Perfect.